In September 1944, the Allies launched one of the most ambitious operations of the Second World War, Operation Market Garden. A bold airborne assault aimed to secure key bridges across the Netherlands, opening the gateway to Germany. But this daring plan, conceived to end the war swiftly, would instead become one of its most harrowing failures. On September 17th, over 34,000 paratroopers from the British, American, and Polish divisions descended from the skies. Their objective: capture key bridges at Arnhem, Nijmegen, and Eindhoven before the Germans could reinforce their positions, but fate had other plans. The plan relied on speed and surprise, but the operation soon encountered unforeseen obstacles. The terrain, vast marshes and dense woods, slowed the armored divisions. Communication broke down. Allied tanks advanced on a narrow causeway, vulnerable to relentless German counterattacks. At Arnhem, the British 1st Airborne Division fought for control of the bridge. Cut off from reinforcements, they were isolated, surrounded by enemy forces. The battle turned into a brutal 9-day siege, with supplies running low and men suffering from exhaustion. As the days dragged on, the soldiers at Arnhem endured hellish conditions. Sergeant Dennis Smith of the Army Film Unit described the relentless shelling. "The men are tired, weary, and food is becoming scarce. If we are not relieved soon, they will drop from sheer exhaustion." Market Garden was a gamble that cost over 2/3 of the 1st Airborne Division. A grand vision that would end with the Allies retreating across the Rhine, forced to wait 6 more months to push into Germany. Operation Market Garden failed, but its legacy endures. For the people of the Netherlands, it brought both liberation and loss. And for those who fought at Arnhem, their courage became immortalized in history. If in the years to come you meet a man who says, "I was at Arnhem," raise your hat and buy him a drink.
All right, so today we are going back to World War II
Oh, yeah.
to unpack Operation Market Garden.
Okay.
And you probably already know that it was a very daring Allied operation and a very costly failure. But what we have here is a documentary script.
Okay.
So we're going to dig into not just the events themselves, but also how the story is being told visually through this documentary.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the context, right?
Yeah.
So it's September 1944.
Uh-huh.
The Allies, they're on the offensive.
Yeah.
They're pushing towards Germany.
Right. Yeah.
So the question is, why did this plan that was supposed to end the war so quickly turn into such a devastating defeat?
Yeah.
That's what we're going to explore today.
Exactly. And we're talking about securing a route right into Germany by capturing this series of bridges in the Netherlands. Yeah. And the script throws out a number over 34,000 paratroopers.
Wow.
Involved. That's a huge airborne operation, even for World War II.
It was a massive gamble.
Yeah.
Relying on speed and surprise.
Right.
British, American, and Polish forces were all a part of it.
Wow.
And the goal was to seize these bridges.
Okay.
Arnhem, Nijmegen, Eindhoven, before the Germans could react.
And of course, the most famous of those bridges is Arnhem.
Yes.
The northernmost target, which really becomes a focal point of the documentary.
Yeah, Arnhem is key to understanding why Market Garden failed.
Okay.
The British 1st Airborne Division was supposed to hold it until ground forces arrived.
Right.
But they became isolated, surrounded by the Germans. And that's where this brutal 9-day siege unfolded.
And the script does not shy away from how brutal that siege was.
No.
But before we get into the human cost, let's talk about some of the factors that led to this situation in the first place. And the documentary really emphasizes the terrain as not being exactly ideal.
Yeah, it's an understatement.
For a rapid advance.
We're talking vast marshes, dense forests.
Oh, wow.
Even the documentary shows a visual of a tank completely bogged down.
Yeah.
Now, you being interested in military tactics can really appreciate how this negated the Allies' advantage in armor.
Right.
Heavy tanks were essentially useless.
Wow, so it wasn't just the tanks.
Yeah.
The script talks about the entire Allied advance being slowed down, making it impossible to reach Arnhem in time to relieve those paratroopers.
Precisely the Germans, despite being on the back foot strategically, they were very effective in exploiting this terrain.
Oh, wow.
They used smaller anti-tank weapons, hit-and-run tactics, and really just disrupted the Allied timetable.
Interesting.
It raises the question, could a different route, even if slightly longer, have been more successful?
That's a great point. And on top of the terrain, the script mentions communication breakdowns, which seem like a pretty big deal.
Absolutely crucial.
In an operation this complex.
Yeah, and here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
For anyone who's into the technical side of things.
Okay.
The British paratroopers, for example, were using radios that had limited range.
Oh, wow.
So they couldn't reliably contact their headquarters or the advancing ground forces.
Yeah.
So that isolation played a huge role in the Arnhem siege.
So you have these guys
Yeah.
stuck at Arnhem fighting for their lives.
Right.
And unable to effectively communicate with the rest of the Allied forces.
Not a good situation.
Not a good situation to be in.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Right, and that's where that human cost comes in.
Yeah.
And there's this powerful quote from Sergeant Dennis Smith. He was there in Arnhem.
Right.
And he says, "The men are tired, weary, and food is becoming scarce.
Oh, wow.
If we are not relieved soon, they will drop from sheer exhaustion."
It's chilling, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the documentary uses this quote to shift the focus from grand strategy to the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
These guys were soaked to the bone.
Wow.
Constantly under fire.
Yeah.
And their supplies were running out, yet they held on, hoping for relief that never came.
And the script mentions the dwindling supplies, the relentless shelling.
Right.
And it really paints a picture of just how desperate the situation was becoming.
What strikes me is that even in this dire situation, their primary concern wasn't personal survival, but being relieved so they could continue the mission.
Wow.
That speaks volumes about their dedication.
It really does. And tragically, as we know, over 7,500 men from the 1st Airborne Division were lost at Arnhem.
It's devastating.
It's a devastating reminder of the sacrifices made during this operation.
The losses were staggering. And the documentary drives that home by juxtaposing these scenes of intense fighting
with
present-day images of the peaceful Arnhem Bridge.
Oh, wow.
It's a powerful reminder that even though the war ended decades ago, its impact continues to be felt.
That contrast is really striking, isn't it?
It is.
It shows us how much time has passed.
Yeah.
And yet the legacy of this battle still lingers. Makes you think about the lasting impact of war.
Yeah.
How these events shape our understanding of history and the world.
Absolutely. And for the people of the Netherlands.
Right.
It's a stark reminder of the struggle for liberation, the sacrifices made on their soil, and the hard-won freedom that they achieved.
It's interesting how the documentary uses visuals
Yeah.
to convey these different layers of the story.
Right.
We see the Rhine River paratroopers descending from the sky, that haunting image of the Arnhem Bridge.
Yeah.
It all adds this visceral element to the narrative.
Those visuals are crucial.
Yeah.
They help us to imagine the scale and intensity of the operation.
Right.
And they create an emotional connection to the events.
Yeah.
And they also highlight a key question that the documentary seems to be grappling with.
Okay.
Was Operation Market Garden fundamentally flawed from the start?
That's what we'll delve into next.
Yeah, the documentary doesn't shy away from showing that while it was an incredibly bold operation,
right,
there were some serious miscalculations.
Like you were saying, the terrain was a major factor, but was it the only reason for the failure?
The documentary pushes you to think about that. Was it simply too ambitious?
Okay.
Were the planners overly optimistic about the speed of the advance? You have to remember the intelligence on German strength and their ability to react was flawed.
The script even hints at some disagreements among the Allied commanders about the plan itself.
Exactly. And that ties back into the communication issues.
Okay.
The documentary mentions Field Marshal Montgomery, who was a big proponent of Market Garden.
Right.
He may have overestimated the element of surprise.
So even if the terrain hadn't been such a problem, there were these underlying issues with intelligence and maybe even a bit of overconfidence.
That seems to be what the documentary is suggesting.
Yeah.
And for you, with your interest in logistics, this should be particularly interesting.
Okay.
The supply chain for such a large airborne operation was incredibly complex. The reliance on a single narrow road vulnerable to attack was a huge risk.
The script shows those long columns of trucks struggling to keep up with the advancing troops.
Yeah.
It makes you realize how easily that lifeline could be severed.
And it was the Germans, once they realized what was happening, were able to launch counterattacks, disrupt the flow of supplies, and further isolate the paratroopers at Arnhem.
It's interesting how the documentary uses these archival images to illustrate these logistical challenges you see, destroyed vehicles, muddy roads, and it really brings home the difficulties that they faced.
Those visuals are powerful, and for someone like you who appreciates the behind-the-scenes aspects of military operations, it really highlights how logistics can make or break a campaign.
The documentary also doesn't shy away from showing the German perspective, which is something you don't always get in World War II documentaries.
That's the strength of this script. We see how the Germans initially caught off guard, quickly adapted. They used their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. And their anti-tank tactics were highly effective.
And you even see interviews with German veterans who talk about the fierce fighting and their determination to hold the line.
It's crucial to have those multiple perspectives. It reminds us that there were individuals on both sides making decisions, fighting and dying. It humanizes the conflict in a way that purely strategic analysis often misses.
And for the Dutch people caught in the middle of this, the documentary really emphasizes the mixed emotions.
It was liberation, but at a tremendous cost. The script shows scenes of jubilation as the Allies arrived, but also the devastation caused by the fighting.
There's this one scene that's particularly powerful.
Okay.
It shows Dutch civilians helping to dig graves.
Wow.
For fallen soldiers, both Allied and German.
Oh, wow.
And it really brings home the human toll of war.
That's a moment that sticks with you. And it reinforces the point that even though Operation Market Garden is often remembered as a failure, it had a profound impact on the people of the Netherlands.
Right. And the documentary makes sure we understand that it wasn't just a strategic setback. It was an event that shaped lives and left a lasting legacy.
The script mentions memorials dedicated to the fallen soldiers and how the legacy in this battle continues to resonate with the Dutch people. It's a reminder that history is not just something we read about in books.
Right.
It's lived experience that continues to shape the present.
And speaking of learning from the past, the documentary raises some thought-provoking questions about the lessons of Operation Market Garden.
Those are questions worth exploring. The documentary poses a question: could anything have been done differently to avoid the tragedy at Arnhem?
Yeah, it's easy to look back and say, well, they should have done this or they shouldn't have done that. But the script does a good job of presenting those dilemmas that the Allied commanders faced. They were operating under immense pressure with limited information and a very strong desire to end that war quickly.
Exactly. And considering your expertise in logistics, this has got to be fascinating.
Right.
Could the supply chain have been better managed?
Yeah.
Was the reliance on just a single road just too risky?
Yeah.
Or were those risks simply unavoidable, given the ambitious nature of the operation?
It's a tough call.
Yeah.
The documentary shows maps with the planned routes, the narrow corridors that the Allies were trying to push through.
Right.
It makes you realize just how vulnerable those supply lines were.
And the Germans, to their credit, exploited those vulnerabilities brilliantly.
Yeah.
They didn't need to win outright.
Right.
Just delay the Allied advance long enough for Arnhem to become untenable.
And the script doesn't let us forget the human cost of those delays.
No.
It ends with a very simple statement. Okay.
But it's so powerful.
What is it?
It says, if in the years to come you meet a man who says, I was at Arnhem, raise your hat and buy him a drink.
Chills, right?
Yeah.
That says everything about the respect those veterans deserve.
Yeah.
Even though Operation Market Garden failed to achieve its objectives, the courage and sacrifice of those who fought there, particularly at Arnhem, have earned their place in history.
It's a reminder that even in defeat, there are stories of incredible bravery and resilience.
Absolutely.
And those stories deserve to be told.
And for us, looking back, the key isn't to just judge success or failure, but to understand the complexities of this event. And the documentary doesn't shy away from those complexities.
So what can we learn from Operation Market Garden?
That's the big question.
It seems like there are multiple layers.
Yes, there are.
To that question.
On a tactical level, there are lessons about intelligence gathering, logistics, the importance of communication.
Adapting to unexpected challenges.
And on a broader level, it reminds us of the human cost of war.
Absolutely.
The impact it has on individuals and nations, and the need for clear-eyed decision-making, even under intense pressure.
The documentary doesn't give easy answers, which is a good thing. It prompts us to grapple with the ethical dilemmas faced by leaders, the courage and sacrifice of those who serve, and the lasting consequences of war, both intended and unintended.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway from this deep dive. The need to keep asking questions, to seek out multiple perspectives, and to recognize that history is not just a collection of dates and facts, but a tapestry of human experiences, both triumphant and tragic.
So for you listening, think about what resonates most from this deep dive. Was it a particular tactical decision? The courage of those soldiers? The logistical challenges, or perhaps those broader questions about leadership and the ethics of war? There's so much here to ponder.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll have the opportunity to raise a hat and buy a drink for someone who says, I was at Arnhem.
That would be something.
Their story, like those shared in this documentary, deserves to be heard and remembered,